Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about all of the books, movies, and TV shows that I read or watched in March. I had a very successful month, so there's a lot to cover. I got a lot to talk about today, so a snack might be worthy for this video. First, we're gonna go ahead and talk about the books that I read in March. So the first book that I read in March was Windwitch by Susan Dennard, which is the second book in the Witchlands series. I enjoyed this book not quite as much as the first one. I still really enjoyed it. I did find the pace of this book to be a little bit slower though than the first one. This book has a lot darker themes in it than the first book. This one primarily focuses on Merrick's journey, whereas the first one is primarily Safi's journey. Merrick is just a darker character than Safi. He has a lot of internal struggle going on with who he wants to be for his kingdom and his people, and he also had a pretty traumatic event happen to him at the end of the first book. It made the tone of the novel just quite a bit darker. I also felt like this book had a lot more foundational elements to it than the first book, which is weird because usually you find foundational things in a first book. It really intrigued me, and I'm really interested to see what's going to come of these different things that she's mentioned and kind of laid out. And just like in the first book, we have the same 4 point of views as well as the introduction of a 5th point of view. And I really liked that introduction of that last character. It makes it easier for you to empathize with them and better explains their motivations for why they do things that they do. Something though that I would have liked to see more of was romance. The first book had a really great romantic plotline for 2 of the characters. I really root for these characters and I'm shipping them so hard. The fact that there's not a lot of romantic developments in this book upset me. And then we do have a title for the 3rd book. It is called Bloodwitch, so it's going to be focused more on Aedwin, and Aedwin's a very fascinating character, so I cannot wait to see more of that. I'm really hoping that the 4th book is called Weaverwitch. I think that would be fantastic. So in the end, I ended up giving Windwitch 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Daughter of a Pirate King by Tricia Levenseller. I am obsessed with this book. I did do an entire review on reasons why you should pick up this book, so I'll go ahead and link that up. There are quite a few YA novels that market themselves as being pirate books but don't really deliver on the pirate front. This is a book that is marketed as a pirate book and delivers. It's about this young girl named Alosa who is the daughter of the Pirate King, and she intentionally gets herself captured by an enemy pirate ship in order to go onto the ship and steal this magical map for her father. It's kind of told in a very similar way to Pirates of the Caribbean. There is this more mortal world, but then there's this incredible, fantastical seafaring element to it. This definitely felt like something that could happen in the Pirates of the Caribbean world. A lot of like the creatures and the mythology of Pirates of the Caribbean was this. Like it felt very similar. I don't want to compare this directly to Pirates of the Caribbean because it's not that. I don't want to over exceed your expectations, but if you are familiar with the Pirates of the Caribbean style of monsters and myths and legends, I think that you would really like this because it's very similar. To me, it felt like Tricia Levenseller was a fan of Pirates of the Caribbean, took it and adapted it and made it her own and created this book. There's even a quote from At World's End, which is a Pirates of the Caribbean movie, on the dedication page. In my opinion, it's almost dedicated to Pirates of the Caribbean. I ended up giving The Daughter of the Pirate King by Tricia Levenseller a 5 out of 5 stars. And after that, I picked up Crystal Storm by Morgan Rhodes. This is the 5th book in the Fallen Kingdom series, and I have mixed feelings on this book. I enjoyed it as much as Frozen Tides, which is so far my favorite in the series, but at the same time, I wasn't necessarily enjoying where things were going with certain characters. Gotten to the point where the writing and the story is really gripping and keeps my interest, but at the same time, I'm not loving what she's doing with my babies. There are some really amazing reveals in this one. I've been waiting for since the first book. We are finally getting some of that payoff in book 5. Like I feel like it's about damn time. And also there were a lot of really great romantic tension moments between Cleo and Magnus, who are my 2 favorite characters in this book. This book actually really amped up my level of love for Magnus. I didn't care much for him in the first 3.5 books, but he's really starting to grow on me. But their relationship is still, in book 5, a 5 steps forward, 20 steps back. 1 step forward, 20 steps back. They should be done with that by now. I like a good tension in a romance. I like characters who like will they, won't they, but at this point, I just want to know, will they or won't they? Like put them together or not? Like pick. They keep going back and forth because they won't tell each other how they really feel, and it's frustrating. In this installment, we're getting even more perspectives. Like the perspectives in the series is ridiculous. So we're getting little glimpses of everyone's actual storyline without getting the entire storyline. So I feel like the perspectives are getting a little out of control, especially for the length of these books. They're only about 400 pages, so you're not getting a ton of development with each story, and it's frustrating. You want to see more of these characters, and you're not getting that because she's putting in too many perspectives, and she won't lengthen the books. In comparison, like Throne of Glass, because it's another YA fantasy series. The books are progressively getting longer, and we're progressively getting more POVs. So we have more time to cover more characters. Whereas Morgan Rhodes is just trying to cram more and more and more into the same length of book as the first one. And I just don't feel like there's enough time in this book for everything. I don't think that a 400-page book is gonna be enough time for the finale. And it's making me nervous. We're finally getting things done at the end of this book. Things are finally coming into play that we've been waiting for since like book 1 or 2. So I have a feeling the conclusion's gonna be really rushed and sloppy and messy and unfulfilling. I also was very excited for Lucia's storyline in books 3 and 4, and then in this book, no. Her storyline took a very Twilight-esque turn. It just felt really cheap and contrived and overdone and Twilighty. And I did not like where that storyline went. You know, that seemed like a lot of negatives, but I was really addicted to this book. Because of that, I only ended up taking off 1.5 stars, and I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was Confess by Colleen Hoover. So in this book, we follow a early 20-year-old named Auburn who has just moved to Dallas from the Portland area. She's in desperate need of a second job and happens to stumble upon a help wanted sign in an art studio's window. The studio is owned by Owen, who is a young up-and-coming artist who needs Auburn's help with a grand opening of his, and the two of them kind of hit it off from there. This was not my favorite Colleen Hoover book. I still really enjoyed it. I read it in a day. These books are super easy reads. They're very addicting. I found that Owen and Auburn were just too, especially Auburn, just too passive for my liking. They didn't stand up for themselves enough until the very end. I didn't like reading from her point of view. I didn't like some of her decisions or like rationale for making certain decisions. I mean, I understand in her circumstances why she did those things. I did really enjoy Owen though. I was a little annoyed by all the lying that went on in this book. I mean, everything had a lie. It was a snowball effect. So I guess it really teaches you that lying creates a lot of problems. I feel like if these characters were just more honest with each other and more open with each other, it would have solved so many problems sooner. But they were always so concerned about other people in their lives and they were ever about themselves. So I guess they're very selfless and that's a good quality, but it was like to a fault. One thing though I did really enjoy about this book is the inclusion of art. Colleen Hoover always goes a little extra mile in these instances. She worked with an artist to create illustrations for the ones that are described in the novel. It helped bring the art to life. It made it more relatable. It made it more important. Something though that did really bother me was the ending. It was a little too abrupt. I would have liked to have an epilogue. Just something more from Owen and Auburn. I would have liked a little bit more resolution. Colleen Hoover in the books that I've read previously has done a much better job at resolving her stories, and this one just felt rushed. In the end, I ended up giving Confess a 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book I read this month was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This is actually a reread for me. It was so much fun to go back and reread this after knowing what happens in Akamath, picking out the things that were so blatantly obvious now. I enjoyed it just as much as I did the first time. I just enjoyed it for different reasons. I still had immense emotional turmoil over this book. This one actually, the second time around, it brought tears to my eyes because I understood things in different contexts than I did the first time I read it. So even though it gave me the feelings still, I was getting the feelings from different scenes, different characters. I loved that. It completely was like a new experience reading it a second time. I see what Sarah J. Maas is doing more, and I just thought it was really well done, like a really well executed. I'll see what you did there, Sarah. My mom is reading it for the first time, and it's just very interesting to see how different our opinions are on the book and on certain characters and on certain events. She does not like Rhysand at all, whereas, you know, obviously, I love him. Cannot wait to continue next month with Akamath. Obviously, I ended up giving this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I kept my initial rating. And those are all the books that I read in March. Let's go ahead and talk about the movies that I read this month. Read? Watched. You don't read movies. So I ended up going to see 2 movies this month. The first one being Beauty and the Beast. obviously. I had just seen the original animated film over Christmas, so I didn't have like a nostalgia factor attached to this movie. Really enjoyed this movie. I thought that it was a wonderful adaptation. I really enjoyed all the backstory that they filled in. I thought that it really made sense for the characters. I thought that it made sense for the storyline, and I just really enjoyed it. I liked learning more about why the beast was exactly cursed. It made so much more sense in my mind. I really liked what they did, how they tweaked it and made it new and refreshing, but also paid great homage to the original. So glad that they decided to include the music in this movie. I know for a while they were kind of thinking about taking out the iconic songs, and I'm so glad that they didn't. I mean, how do you have a Disney movie without the iconic Disney songs? I thought that they sounded great. The only thing I had a little bit of an issue with was the very first song that Emma Watson sang in the village. The first line was jarring. It was very obviously overly edited and auto-tuned, but just that moment kind of pulled me out of it and was like, whoa, it was a little bit too much, Disney. As the movie went on and as I heard her sing more and more of the songs, I didn't notice it at all. I actually became very accustomed to her singing voice. I thought she sounded great. 2 new songs they added. The one of them, I don't even remember what it was. Evermore was wonderful. I loved that scene. I loved that song. It had so many great moments. So many things were so funny. I was laughing so hard. They just had some great comedic moments. I thought that the actors did wonderful. And the overall like set design and the props and everything was so ornate. I felt like I was looking at a Disney theme park. It gave me a lot of vibes similar to the Phantom of the Opera, like the costumes, the fact that it's set in France, the ornate decor. It just felt very Phantom of the Opera-y. The music was really reminiscent of Phantom of the Opera too. Like I could see Phantom singing Evermore, and I love Phantom of the Opera, so that's like a compliment. I had very few gripes with it. If you haven't for some reason seen Beauty and the Beast yet, I highly recommend, if you are interested, to go see it. The second movie we went to go see was Power Rangers, which I had mentioned I was a little weary about because I'm like, this could be so cheesy and so bad, but it was cheesy. But it was cheesy in the way that only Power Rangers can be cheesy. I mean, Power Rangers is a ridiculously cheesy show. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers! Go Power Rangers! This movie had that cheese, but it was still enjoyable. It wasn't over the top. Also very heavily influenced by the 1993 version of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and then the Dino Power Ranger TV show. It had some really great diversity too in the cast. We had a Latina character who's also part of the LGBT community. We had an African American character. We had an Asian character. The African American character is on the autism spectrum. He was my favorite character. I don't know how well the representation for autism is. He was so adorably funny. I loved him, and I loved that it showed that regardless of what you are or who you are, you can be a superhero. I thought that was so important for younger kids who will be going to watch this movie because this is obviously geared towards young children. It felt nostalgic, but fresh and new at the same time. It was still the Power Rangers, but updated for 2017, and I really, really enjoyed it. It was set up as being the first in a series, which makes me even more excited. There was one scene though, they used the Power Ranger theme song. While you can't make a Power Ranger movie and not use the theme song, it was like in a really weird place. This is such an epic scene. Why are they playing the Power Ranger theme song right now? The Megazord was fantastic. There were so many wonderful lines. Their suits looked so cool. They were made out of like alien material, not some lame spandex jumpsuit. I loved the 5 characters dynamic and how they worked together. I loved the emphasis on friendship and teamwork and cooperation that the movie really focused on. I think it's a great addition to the superhero movie realm. I loved it. I walked out of the theater being like, I want to be a Power Ranger. And I haven't had that thought since I was probably like 9 years old. Now let's go ahead and talk about the TV shows that I watched this month. So this month we had the series finale of the Vampire Diaries. Oh God, I loved it so much. I have never cried like that in my life. Not for a family death, for a heartbreak, for a breakup. Nothing has ever made me cry like the finale of this show did. I was not expecting the onslaught of waterfall tears and snot and it running in my mouth. I was shaking. I was doing really, really well for the first like 45 minutes of the show. But then when Stefan and Elena had their scene together and then Stefan ran into an old character, I've just lost it and it all went to shit after that. When I thought that my crying was done, they'd hit you with another old character and the tears would start coming again. I thought it was perfect. I've watched it twice, Second time, I still cried like a baby, but I was watching it with my mom, so I tried to be a little bit more composed so I wasn't distracting her from her experience. She didn't cry. She got a little teary-eyed at one point, but she didn't cry like I did. I loved it. I thought it was the perfect ending. I couldn't have asked for anything better. I mean, it did exactly what I wanted it to do, and I loved it. I'm also really excited for how one of the characters could potentially be linked to the originals, and that makes me so excited. I think it's going to make a lot of fans excited. I hope it actually happens because I think that this character would make a wonderful addition to the originals cast. And the other thing I watched this month were the first 10 episodes of Shadowhunters Season 2. The first 3 episodes were garbage. They got new showrunners. Episode 4, so the first 3 were still like written and produced by the people who did season 1, and it was glaringly evident. There was a lot of messy plot holes. Things were happening every 10 seconds. Nothing was fully developed. Nothing made sense. There were things being thrown in there left and right. Just a lot of like throwing things up in the air and letting your arms go and watching them all drop and just be like, let's see where it's gonna land. This wonderful shift came in episode 4 when the new showrunners took over. They are doing a fantastic job with what they were given to start with. What they were given to salvage was just so bad. They've turned it around and made it so much better. It is still not the best show on the planet. It has come so far. It feels like a show. A watchable, enjoyable show. They have like the maximum of like 3 story arcs happening in 1 episode. Story arcs are spanning multiple episodes rather than happening in half of an episode. Things have slowed down. We're getting a little bit more book content as well. It just feels so much more fleshed out. Actors are doing so much better. They feel so much more grounded in their roles, probably because they have better scripts and things aren't happening at the speed of light. I'm very excited to see what happens in season 2B. Paul Wesley from the Vampire Diaries is coming on to direct some episodes in 2B. And I'm really excited because we know how much I love the Vampire Diaries. I'm just happy that it's going in this direction because I feel like it's gonna have a much more successful run. I do think that they did some reveals a little bit too early in the season and they changed some core concepts of the books that I didn't really agree with. Overall, so much better. So that's it. Those are all of the books that I read and the movies and TV shows that I watched in the month of March. I'd love to know what you read or watched this month. Please tell me in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I'll talk to you very soon. Bye!